So I'm just waiting for the transcription thing to start so I can stop it. Cool. Okay, yeah, I mean, I do like this section of work. I really do. Um, because it really speaks to like the question of why education. Is it someone else? Yay, hi Sonal, evening. So please answer. I've only got like a few questions, but it's really like a fun conversation if you play along. Otherwise, it's really boring if it's just me. I think this is really like interesting for me. I don't know how many of you have children. I mean, I'm not asking you, you don't have to share that now. But it was quite funny. I mean, I was a teacher for a very long time, and I almost swore I was never going to have children because I was so tired of always seeing children in my classroom. But lots of these things that I think I will bring up now that came up for me came up mainly more as a parent than as a teacher, which is quite weird. Like some of the questions that were raised around education and schooling, maybe also just I was older, I don't know. I'll probably hear me say there's quite a lot I'll refer to. Like, I mean, it was so hectic choosing a school for like our eldest, our first, who's now 9. My wife's also an academic. At one point, she actually went and wrote a book about it. It's like a small little parents book about choosing a school and like the things that inform choosing a school. I'm just saying that's how like extreme this conversation went for me, and so I do find it particularly interesting. So what it's supposed to cover, and you can look at chapter 11, there's like one or two things. It is really a good read. I mean, you're not expected to study any of it, but I think in like preparation for your assignments, if you do flip through it, it really, I think it's quite interesting. That might be, as it goes. Like if you're the lecturer, you think it's interesting with a student, you just want to get through it. Um, so there's 35 slides. Not all of it is today. We won't get through all of it today. And yeah, and I might jump around a bit. That's why I kind of keep this tab open on the left. So I know it's a weird way of looking at the slides, but it's the only way that I can like jump around without flipping through multiple slides. Um, so we'll focus on really on this, maybe touch on the educators' roles now. We might not get to that today, but that's kind of black and white in the CAPS, like CAPS document, MR Tech document, what the South African educators' roles are. And then eventually it'll be about what are your own, and this is all in preparation for the next task. Who left? Has Winnie left? Yeah. These last ones are really all about you. So it's kind of these two, not last two, what you get out of these two chapters or LOs and how this informs your own perception of one, education, and two, of yourself as a teacher. That's kind of so this conversation in the beginning is to try to kind of make you think the way I see it about education. Um, like and I guess the aim isn't to get you I must say that up front. What's that word, the political word they always use, the politicians, what's that word? Radicalize. The aim is not to to radicalize you and make you like stand up and protest education or anything like that. So if I share my view, please, it's just my view. Like this is mainly more as a parent, and the idea is that you would have your own view, and it can be an opposing view, and that's very cool. Um, hmm, maybe I'm trying to get like a cool like one-liner question where I can get a response from you around what is your aim of it? What do you think was the aim of education? But the next slide is a question for you. Um, so if you look at the CAPS document, so I mean, this sounds lovely if you read this out. I'm not going to read it. Oh, I will. So the aim of the CAP of education, according to the latest curriculum, our CAPS curriculum, is to equip learners with knowledge, skills, and values necessary for self-fulfillment and meaningful participation in society as citizens of a free country. And I mean, this is a lovely line, and it's going to tie into a lot that we're going to say later. And it is true, that is the aim. Um, but then later on in the same CAPS document, I think it's more under the objectives and under the aim. So under the objectives are supposed to inform the aim. If you look at the objectives in the CAPS document, it speaks about stuff like preparing students for higher education or for a place of work. and then that's like, so I start going like, oh, you see, it sounds all perfectly rosy and lovely and meaningful, but actually it might just be a part of the capitalist economy. No, I'm not like super political about this, but it might just be a part of this like capitalist system that we find ourselves in, where money rules the world, you know? Uh, and that's kind of part of this conversation. And like the next, yeah, so who is in control of education? It's really fun. I hope I can play it at the end. It doesn't have lots of words. It's really cool. I don't know if you know this person, and if you ever have free time and you are genuinely interested in being a teacher, I loved it so much. I started playing to my school children. They look at me like, "What are you doing, dude? We don't care about this stuff. We just care about like the pimples on our face and girlfriends and boyfriends. We don't care about any of this. Like, what is the aim?" So it's very cool. He's got a few. This isn't his most popular one. Sir Ken Robinson. He actually passed away a few years ago, but you can see it on the screen. So it's really worth a Google, or on TED. You can find him anywhere. This one over here is my favorite. The second one, I think it's like one of the most viewed ever on thing. This is 2 million views. I think this one must have something like 10 or 100 million, 78 million views. Um, and yeah, it's really an amazing take on education. Sorry, it's playing. If you have a moment, if you are interested, it's really worth a look. Really like an eye opener. Um, he talks about stuff like, and I'm saying it ties into the conversation we're gonna have now. So he talks about things like we have the strong focus on maths and science. Okay, and then what's the end goal of that? So people can build more buildings and start more businesses and fly to the moon. And he says, what about dance? What about art? Now, I'm not a dance or an art teacher. I'm a the irony of this conversation is that I am a BCom student originally. I came from a commerce background, and then I went into PGC. I think I've told you before as well. I fell into PGC by accident, completely by accident. I went to Boston. I thought I'd be rich and make lots of money, and then I fell into teaching, and I fell in love with this other kind of wealth and value, which I think is teaching. Um, so my point is, and so that's kind of the argument, and that's kind of what we're talking about here, like what is, and this, the idea of this conversation is that it shapes your view. You'll see, where is that slide? Well, basically, all of this leads up to helping you with task two. Although we don't want to teach to the assignment, I'm just telling you that there is a place for where this is going for you, like forming this opinion about education. So, sorry, are you still with me? I feel like I'm having fun with this in my head. Are you still there?
Yes.
You are. Okay. It's funny how there's no like there's only a smiley face on this thing. There's no like sad in that little reaction thing. You can't put a sad face or a thumbs down, or can you? So if it's going badly and you're getting bored, put a thumbs down. Um, So I guess before I go on my rant, let's just kind of go back to the theory in the textbook. You will see on, is it page, I've got it open, I think 266, in the beginning, yeah, in the beginning of the chapter. And you can go read it. I won't get to the whole analogy now, just for the sake of time, but there's an analogy of, and it's by this textbook, and I find it kind of weird, about what education should be, and they equate it to a house. And that kind of the education is the foundation, so building this foundation. So education is the house. So what is the foundation? What are the walls? What is the roof? What role do they play? So the walls um are kind of the protection of the house, the perimeter of the house, that also like anchors the house. So who are the walls? Are the walls the government that put these perimeters in place, that put the curriculum in place, that provide the structure? Because I mean the foundation's a big flat thing, The walls what give the house the shape, etc. Um, and then, with education obviously being like this big foundation base, but so for the person that comes out of education and kind of represents this house, and then obviously on top of it, what is the roof? So this is really beautiful analogy. It's really, like as I said, it's not stuff you must go study, but if you are flipping through the book, um, I think it's a cool. It's a cool little analogy to think through in kind of you forming this. Um, the third bullet point is what I want to ask you. So I'm just asking you for one word. I don't care if you spell it wrong. You don't have to type a lot. But so, what is your view on education as it currently stands? Is it a form of conditioning, brainwashing, indoctrination? Just a one word. Do you think it's a form of liberation or freedom? Is it enlightenment and it teaches you something? So yeah, I'm gonna pause because I really want just one word from you, not seven, not 10. Um, but yeah, what are your thoughts on education before we get into it? Like the nature and purpose. What is it there for? Develop society? Um, is it to control people? Question, enlightenment. Cool. Thank you. Enlightenment. Anyone else? Sonal, what are your thoughts? That's really. Is the question confusing or is education confusing? So now you know you said hello earlier on, so now you can type. What do you, a new message? What do you think it is? Freeing, okay, which is almost like enlightenment. Education is educate. Oh, confusing. Education is confusing. Oh, okay. Um, yeah, I like that. What I like to saying about kind of freeing and enlightenment, and that's gonna tie into. We're gonna get into a slide. We're gonna get into a slide about that now, like exactly that word, enlightenment. Um, I think where I'm trying to go to with this is, and you'll see it unpack now. Um, there's this idea that that education was created like a cookie, like a cookie cutter, everything in the same shape, in a mold, like a production factory, so that people could work. Children had to have a place to go, and while they needed a place to go, why not go there and prepare the next generation of workers? Um, they said that this is yeah, that formal education system started. The idea of straight lines, everyone sits in a neat desk in a neat row in straight lines was to mimic at that time, kind of pre-industrial revolution, at that time was to mimic like a factory, you know. So how do you best they called it like it was like before the internet, like how do you create um these workers, it's probably the worst way to say it, these workers that could do like admin tasks, regularly in a structured manner. So how do you condition people to work like that? Like the way that people used to work along, like now, obviously we have flexible working hours, we have remote working, online working. But before it was nothing like that. So how do you start to create all these people that would fit in neat little boxes? There's other views coming up, and you'll get there now. But so that is kind of, so what is the aim? So if you go back to what they say in the CAPS document, it's supposed to be something for self-fulfillment, meaningful participation in society as a citizen of a free country. So if you really kind of just think through that for a little bit. So if you think of your experience in school, um, did you feel like there was a sense of self-fulfillment when you went to school? Was it there to make you feel like, I think most people come out of school feeling quite messed up afterwards, for various reasons. Bullies, bad relationship, bad teachers, bad experiences. So the question is, where are we kind of at in terms of education now? So how do you see it? Do you see it as a form of, so the intention should be enlightenment and freeing, but at the moment, in its current form, I think there is a shift away from the current form. I mean, homeschooling has really exploded, online schooling has exploded, but still the prevalent way of teaching is still formal education in a school where you wear a uniform, You clock in at a certain time, just like a factory worker. You clock out at a certain time. You've got lunch at a certain time. You've got periods in neat little timetables, little boxes. You know, so so is that in keeping with the words enlightenment and freeing? And this was kind of what I was saying about my own experience and just knowing my own child that my child cannot operate in a box. I mean, for a long time, we've been wondering, is it ADHD? And we did all of that. I mean, I'm reluctant to ever label a child as ADHD, but we even went through that because we wanted to understand like what it was with this child that didn't seem that he was suitable for traditional schooling. For one, like, not he can't sit still at all, but he needs to fidget, he needs to fidget when he does stuff. Um, so how is that a place of self-fulfillment for him if he goes into a traditional school? That said, on the other hand, there are kids that do thrive in that kind of situation or that kind of structured environment that schooling does bring and education does bring. Um, but I guess the question is, how much say did anyone have in that? Really, the child themselves. Um, so those are just some of the kind of like the high level thoughts I want you to have around like education. What is the real aim? Is the aim to impart knowledge? Because I mean, let's get serious here. Um, how much of your high school science do you remember? I mean, maybe like I remember the stuff that I enjoyed. So I enjoyed business studies. I enjoyed biology. Did not enjoy science. So I don't remember much science at all. I know that age-old question. I don't mean to knock the math teachers about like how much maths are you going to use. I know maths has got other. I know all the reasons why maths is important. Nothing against it, but you understand what I mean. So when I teach teachers, or when I especially like in teaching kind of teaching pracs when they're going out. I always have to remind them because they're in such a hurry to get through like the lesson plan. I must cover the lesson plan. I must get through all the points in the lesson plan. It's almost never really about, and yeah, we teach content, like you teach business studies or you teach English, but what's more important, the content or the other stuff you're teaching them? The other stuff that doesn't have a name, what they call the hidden curriculum. Hi there, who joined us? Oh yeah, more people's. Um, Sorry to catch you up. We're just kind of chatting through. I did say I would waffle about this quite a bit. We are chatting through just the aims of education, what's its place, why it's there, and we are talking about it, or I'm talking about it, and you are sadly just listening. Um, we're talking about it not for me or to get these stories off my chest, but we're talking about it for you to start forming your own idea of what education looks like for you. At the end of this course, you are expected to write a teaching philosophy. Is it the final task or task two? Anyway, you have to write the teaching philosophy. Um, and so one hopes that you can kind of start thinking critically about what your philosophy is. And I said to everybody else, no one's expecting a miracle now. I think I said this, I'm sorry I'm repeating it, but I think it's important. I never, as a teacher myself, when I taught, I didn't have these thoughts about education as a whole and what part I'm playing in the bigger picture. Only when I had my own child and then when he went to school, I started thinking about the education system. What kind of class do I want him to be in? Do I want him to be limited to a to a uniform? You know, I get why we have uniforms, and also it's cheap on the pocket to just have a uniform, than having to have different clothes every day. But why must we have a uniform? So all those questions, like around self-directed learning. Um, so asking this question to say, how is this ultimately going to impact how you approach a classroom? Look, at this point, no one's going to change the system. I'm not saying that you must go to homeschooling or online schooling. Um, no one's going to change the education system now at all. Okay. Um, but still, it can still inform the way you engage with your class. And on a practical level, what I mean and what I was saying as I stop now to go and do a recap, is when I had students and they would have all these lesson plans that they had to get, and they had to get to the content in this time, and they would kind of go past the fun moments in class. By fun, I mean the engaging and those, the word you use, Kristen, the enlightenment moments. They would kind of rush past those moments in the class because they had to get to the content. And so again, I ask, what is your so what is your approach going to be? I don't think you'll have it all right all at once. I think it evolves over time. And the idea is that you start thinking about it. I'm not saying throw out the curriculum, throw out caps and don't teach it and tell your principal to go fly a kite, because then you won't have a job. So that's not at all what I'm saying. I'm still saying even within the classroom, you have got some power, some autonomy, small things, and I'm going to make small, silly examples, but I think you'll see when I get back to the other stuff, I hope I can bring it back to the bigger theoretical conversation. So how do you set up your classroom, layout wise? What is the tone and the vibe and in your classroom? I'm not saying you've got to be the cool teacher that all the children like. But for example, I had heard one lecturer tell a group of students, remember, because yeah, we were sharing the class and we were both lecturing. I was still at the University of the Free State. And she said to them, for at least the first, I think she said like 3 to 6 months, the first 2 terms, you do not smile, because you have to maintain the line, the order, the control, um, the distance, because you are there. They must respect you. And so don't smile. I still can't get over it. Why would you do this job then if you're not going to smile? If you're not going to enjoy it, why mustn't you become like a policeman or something else? I don't know. But it's not teaching, isn't it? Do you understand where I'm going to about, like, if you understand the function of education, or the aim of education to be enlightenment, to be self-fulfillment, then you're not going to be too. I understand the need for order. I was a teacher for a long time. Understand the need for order, and it's a tough balance between, like, um, what's the word? Being with flexible, being different, being alternative, to being like a complete madhouse in your classroom. Um, I don't know. Sometimes I might repeat myself, so excuse me if I do. So so for me, that view of don't smile, there's clear lines. You're not the manager. You're not the, like, and I'm saying manager in relation to the what I was saying earlier on about how we've all been taught to sit in a straight line, to sit in neat lines, because we essentially replicated the factories in the Industrial Revolution. So teaching kind of replicated what a factory looked like. It looked like at school. One person stands up front, barks out the orders. He's the knower of all knowledge, and the people sitting in the benches are like the workers, And that's why I'm making this analogy of a manager. Whereas the view now, and this is where I struggle with let me just go back for those that weren't here. This is where I struggle with the caps. I'm not, then again, pleased. Don't go and run to government. I mean, you can and say this lecturer says caps is rubbish. I don't. I want you to question it as much, and we have to keep questioning it. That's kind of the point of education. Do we keep accepting things, or do we keep questioning for our own enlightenment and development? Um, so this is what kind of I was saying, with one of the points where I don't, so we say this in our policy about what education should be. But then in the classroom, and I'm not talking about poverty only and only poor areas, and that's not my reference here. That's another philosophical conversation on its own, which is actually a question that's going to come up now towards the end of the slide. So what I'm saying is that, is the education set up, is our system set up so that children, students, learners can actually achieve self-fulfillment? Is it? I hope you're sitting there nodding your head or shaking your head. So side to side or up and down, whichever way. If you're saying, no, no, you're talking rubbish, that's cool. If you're agreeing with me, that's cool too. As long as you are kind of questioning it for yourself. Because does that mean like if you are a good worker who can sit in your desk, follow orders, do the worksheet, does that mean that you are then going to make a meaningful participation in society? So if you are off your rockers, you can't sit still because you need to draw and eventually become an artist. So how does that child that wasn't like amazing, but then he becomes an artist or something outside of the box later on? He's not an accountant sitting in an office. Nothing wrong with accountants. But you understand what I mean? Like the disparity between how we teach, whether it's a resource or under-resourced school, how we teach versus this pursuit of self-fulfillment. Um, and I'm not saying I have the answer to any of it. I don't. I mean, the idea is that we keep questioning it. Um, there's this video I used to show my students when I taught at school. I could probably find it for you also now. It's a TED talk also. A young, like I think he was 11. He was 11 or something at the time, and it was called hack schooling. And he essentially was like homeschooled, but so his curriculum, like for him, natural science, let's call it, was him going out and doing things, actual things in nature. He'd meet people, he'd go to the museum, he'd go to the aquarium, and he'd talk to people at the aquarium about, oh, how does this work? How does that work? I'm not saying it solves everything, please, please, please. But you understand my idea between like where does this idea of self-fulfillment and meaningful participation come in? Okay. I told you I can talk about this one forever. I absolutely love like this question, but let me move on. So, how do we move towards an understanding? We spoke about the house. You can see it in your textbook. So, what are some of what is the purpose of education? So, how do we position this conversation? And that's why I like that you said the word enlightenment. Sorry, the image in your textbook is maybe a bit better than this one. Um, So essentially kind of three factors, three elements, three approaches to what education is. So is it a sociological thing? Is it an institutional thing? Or is it, as we said, about enlightenment? Um, I know that the image says that it's all three. So maybe I should ask this question. Or should I explain them first and then ask you the question? Okay, so sociological is kind of the function of school to prepare you for a role in society. So to socialize with others, this is often the counter argument to homeschooling. I'm not saying I'm for homeschooling. My child still goes to a pretty much standard school for all of my nonsense I'm talking about here. My children still go to a pretty standard school with straight up desks and uniforms. So for all of my nonsense that I'm saying, that's what I'm saying. Like this is my view. So this is often the counter argument to traditional schooling or to homeschooling, sorry, is the sociological. So sociological meaning the social aspect, the preparing someone to be a member of society, how they interact with other students. So I mean, even this year, we made a big move. We moved provinces, and my son was actually in a very traditional boys' school for all of the rubbish and all of my worldviews and my wife's she's worse than me, you know, views of education and the system. He ended up in a very standard traditional and on top of it, a boys' school, which I mean, I still don't know why I did it. We've moved in a different province, we're now in a co-ed school, smaller school. And so he's now learning, you can see there's a whole different skill he's acquiring around just being in a class with girls, even just the way they play at break, that kind of thing. So there's that argument about school, that school plays a major role in socialization of young people. Cool. And you'll see we'll get to some theorists now that will kind of that counter that argument a little bit. So then there's a second one is the institutional understanding of a school. So you'll see in the textbook they say very nicely. It's almost they say like where you go. Like I just classified a school now as a boys' school, So that's an institutional. So um, if you introduce yourself, you'll say not the first thing you'll say about yourself, but if it's that kind of a conversation. So yeah, I matriculated at this school, and then I went to this institute, and I went to this university to study. And immediately there are like a set of assumptions that fall into place about what that experience was. So if you meet me and I say, yeah, I was homeschooled, and then I went to design school afterwards, you already have a perception of what I look like, or what kind of personality I am, or who I am, because of the rules and the processes, the rules and or freedom, the processes and or lack thereof in a certain institution. You get what I mean? Are you still there? Have I bored you to death? Sorry. Are you still okay? Or yeah, are you sure you're not just being nice and clicking? Okay. Because you must say so. Sure. Okay. So there's the institutional side of things, and then there is the general enlightenment. And the idea is that to learn, to ask questions and answers, to go out and actually find answers, to find the light for yourself. Okay, there's more to it. I'll get there now. So, of those three, you have to choose one. You can't say all three. There's not all of the above. There's not none of the above. You have to choose one. Of those three, you can just type it for short. If you're too lazy to type all the words, all the letters, is it a sociological more important? Is institutional more important, or is enlightenment more important? Of the three, give you a second. Okay, there is a wrong or right answer, but it's okay if you get it wrong.
I was also going to say enlightenment.
Just copying your earlier answer, man. Are you sure it's enlightenment? Come on, I'll give you one more chance. I'm joking. I'm joking. Okay, enlightenment. We have two enlightenments going once, twice. Ashwini, you can't say confusing. Sociological, institutional. So is it about the
I
institution
think
that you're
it's
associated
sociological
with?
thing.
Say
I
again.
think it is sociological thing. It's sociological.
Sociological. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Noma Google. Noma. Anything from you? I know you guys joined, but you're just sitting there all quiet. Gareth, how's it going? Any thoughts? Well, look, I mean, the diagram kind of gives it away that it's all three, right? That there is an interlink. But the aim ultimately should always be enlightenment. Sorry, it's over here. Um, the aim is always that it is kind of led by enlightenment, that all other things, not enlightenment is, but the aim is always to develop the human mind, no, and to grow. Um, Although it's not possible to do, you can't escape the others. Although the goal, unless you go and you'll see some, look, all of you are still right, is really not completely wrong. You're right according to a certain theorist, which we'll talk about now. So some theorists believe one way or the other way. Okay, so you're not right or wrong. So like I said, sociological is how people learn to live. Institutional means the development of a person as a result of certain institutional influences. So what goes on in the school, etc. And then ultimately about development of the human mind. So those are some of the key concepts. So as a teacher, you know, where does your focus fall or lie? It should be on enlightenment, yeah. Um, and then obviously some aspect of socialization is important. So you can't ignore the social aspect of schooling. So when people kick back against group work, I lose my mind because and this is like even in this lecturing space, and people push back against group work. I mean, I know it's hard, but how else would people learn the hard stuff? I mean, you're all grown now, and you've done some stuff in the real grown world, and I mean, kids are mean and they're weird and they can be quite evil to each other, but it's not the same kind of evil as what old people can do. You feel me? Like whatever, bombs, wars, corruption, stealing, a lot worse off. So you can't ignore the sociological aspect. And then the institutional one, I think, is one always worth questioning. Kind of what's the school you're in? Is that school lining up with the aims of education as what you understand it to be? Okay, let me move on. I'm just watching the time ticking away. So this is what I was saying, Dr. Anne, that general enlightenment is the most important, and the development of the mind is the focus of education, and the others, however, cannot be ignored. That is to summarize what I was saying. Okay, let me quickly just run through some fun theoretical history, but I think it's summarized quite nicely, so you understand where this all comes from. Because yeah, you'll see this question of control comes in a lot in terms of like who controls education, and that's kind of, I guess, one of the questions of the day. And obviously how that manifests. So, first up, we have Plato, who fully believed in state control of education. And I like this line. And so this is what I want you to question. So if you look at state control of education, and then he says, the state should be in control because it has the best interest of society in mind and provides the good life. Now, I mean, just pause on that for a second. I mean, if only like, if it's like, I don't know, in South Africa, this varies across different countries. But I think ours is the 10% of the country. And this isn't a race comment, please. I've got many of those because that is like the work that I do is race, gender, and class. So I'm not scared of the conversation. It's not a race comment, but it's kind of more of a class comment. So if 10% of society owns above 60, I think it's now 60 something percent of the resources of that society, then I mean, how can you tell me that this, how does this then work? That we have state control of education and that the state is in control because it has the best interest of society in mind. So obviously, like capitalism has had a massive influence on education, like it or not, that's the Industrial Revolution. And that argument around the Industrial Revolution. So, what I'm trying to say, yeah, so Plato was the original, everyone should sit in a straight line, everyone should follow orders, because we wanted an orderly social system and that everyone will have their place in society, whether you are a worker or a soldier or the ruler of that society. I mean, how does that make you feel in your gut? It makes me feel like dirty and yucky, like that's not the kind of thing I want to do for my students at school. Like, you are here because you've got a place to go out there and be a cog. Oh, as Benny, nice. See, that's hard when you bring in like the idea of, like, you'll see there's a question, I don't remember if it was on the slides or in the textbook. Um, so like there's this question around like what is to blame, for poor education in South Africa, for example. So okay, let me get them jumping the gun now. Hold on. Okay, so Plato spoke of this cave ignorance to knowledge. So you'll see if you look in the textbook, I'm just checking the page. As like I said, you don't have to go study the textbook, but if you have any interest in this stuff, there's like a very cool story and a very cool diagram. I can't read the whole thing for you now, but essentially where like it refers to prisoners and stuff and how they used to be locked up in caves and how people would introduce light to kind of control behavior, dictate behavior, so and take them from darkness to the light, from ignorance to enlightenment. So there's a whole story. Yeah, and then I like also that there was this link. Obviously, everything back then had some grounding in religion, and that this was all that the idea of a controlled society is ordained, and that's an order by God. Whew. I don't know. I don't know what religions you are, and this isn't an anti-religious statement, but how does that feel that you're saying that, God said we must sit in straight lines in class? I don't know. I don't know. You know what I mean? I don't know. So, um, and ultimately, the purpose of education is to provide unity and order in society. I mean, doesn't it sound like we all signed up for the army? Like full stop, we're just all in the army, just good workers. You understand like what I meant earlier on about kind of questioning your own philosophy and what this means. Like I was trying to say practically, it doesn't mean that you must go change your education system. I mean, you have another. Are you agreeing, Kristen? Are you agreeing? Are you one of those? It's okay. Don't be worried about my elevated tone. It's completely okay, if that is where you stand, that education should create society into order. That's also okay. I'm joking. I don't think that's what you're saying. Okay. Um, but so what can you do in your classroom to like introduce a little bit of chaos into this ordered society? Um, I started off all like when I started not losing control, but struggling with the idea of controlling my class. When they're coming from break or they're coming from changing over periods, so they walk from one class to another. Such a like standard fight you have with the students is some schools make you line up outside the class before you enter, and you all enter quietly, or you go out and you line up again. Um, some schools you can just walk into class, like if it's a smaller school, you just walk in from class to class or from break and you put your bags down. Often, depending on whatever school you're in, what kind of teacher you are, that then ends up in becoming a rioting classroom. Either it is complete chaos, so everyone's like talking loud, and the teacher must shout and sit down, take your seats, take out your books. That movie scene. Or it's the opposite. It's the army scene. They line up, and then you start. As soon as you see your teacher, you shut up and you march in left, right, left, right. Don't say a word or you get detention. You know. So good. Yeah, you can speak if you want to. Please, I'd love it if you said something, Kristen. Go.
Oh, I was just no, I was agreeing with you saying that what Plato says feels like you're joining the army. So I think for me, I would want a classroom that's a little bit more like you can keep the order, but you can have a bit of freedom as well. Because I think there can be a balance. It doesn't have to be one or the other.
Exactly. Isn't that like what? I mean, they all talk about society, but isn't that what society is? Not not neat, not orderly, not straight lines. So
Exactly.
yeah. And you wonder why some children, not all children, not to generalize, like leave school and they just crash out because they can't deal with the transition from the structured, ordered environment to having some sense of freedom. And you wonder why first years all fail so much. I mean, I failed some of my first year. And I think for that same reason, so used to like, and I did very well in matric. I wasn't like a stupid, but when I got that freedom out of school, like I had an old school, proper line up outside. If you talk in the line, detention, full stop. My teachers was, should you give us writing out, like pages and pages. She was so proud, she so cheeky and she was old. So she been doing it for years to many generations of students. My biology teacher, I'll never forget her, clearly. And all she would do all day is sit on her desk, like almost like trying to be cool, but not really cool at all. Quite old, that woman. And she would sit there and she would read out of this book, not even a textbook, a book that she had created over the years, like her book of notes. And she would read to you and you had to take, so she would dictate to you. That's actually what I'm looking for, not read to you. She would read and you would write down notes. She would put the diagram on the board. You had to copy the diagram down. Like biology should be fun. You should be touching some guts or cutting something up, I think, isn't it? Um, she would draw the picture on the board perfectly, very good. I mean, she was old, so she'd been doing it for years. So and that was still like we had chalk. I'm not that old, but the school was a bit old school. Maybe I am that old. So she would draw like with chalk these beautiful diagrams of the cell and of whatever we had to do. You had to copy it down into your book. Now, I don't know if I go back to the aims of this was before caps also, so I mustn't like I'm not dissing caps here, but there was there was some knowledge there. But were there any skills taught except for taking down notes? Were there any values besides like shut up and listen because I'm the boss? And was there ever any sense of self-fulfillment at all, or in that kind of a classroom? Because how do you like what does that mean for meaningful participation in society if all you know? Because a part of meaningful participation in society is also questioning things like government, questioning society. That makes it meaningful to put up your hand to vote. And to vote means you must have a different opinion of a party. Those are the things of a free country. Well, if you're being taught, like my teacher taught me, to sit down and just write, I don't understand how those two things correspond at all. So yeah, that uses to get you like thinking about this for yourself. There's a few more, and I'll try and rush through them for time that I want to get through now. So that was Plato, but I think that's a very profound one because I think that really shaped a lot. I mean, that's still how education is today. And lots of people, this I'm not religious, please, please, please. Um, but this is still how people kind of position their Christian schools today, isn't it? I'm saying Christian because of the word of God. Actually, even some like Islamic schools, also different faith, but similar concepts, you know. Let me move on. I told you I can get carried away with this one quite a bit. Okay. The other theorist, Locke. This is an interesting contrast and speaks a lot to the homeschooling industry. Um, I say industry, I should say homeschooling movement or something. Where it's all about parental control. And the argument here that God actually put parents in place to protect and raise children, not put a school in place with an ordered, structured society. Isn't this like a fun twist on what Plato said? But then it gets messy because children must honor and obey their parents. I get that, and therefore things like homeschooling. I mean, that doesn't make any sense again in light of this, you know. Because now we're going to lose the society part quite a bit, which is like I said, the argument against homeschooling. I know there are other ways around it. I know in the world we live in now, socialization is not the same as what we perceived a long time ago. Socialization doesn't mean that you must be in a classroom. Nowadays, sadly, socializing means the gram. Yeah. So the world has changed also to some extent. So it's not the same kind of socialization that we talk about anymore. Anyway, so yeah, so this was kind of Locke's argument that if you can teach your own children in your home, you can teach them, how to be in society as what kind of based on what you believe. Because so many people have got different opinions. I can't leave it up to somebody else to raise my child, etc. Which is again very different to the Africanized theories around education. Um, which really looks at there's a few like really big words here. I'll try and explain them to you briefly. The first one, pre-parationism, pre-parationism, um, really kind of talks to that you must, it's really like a biblical reference, that you must, that all things kind of work through God's grace. If that makes any sense. So it's more like a kind of a gospel under religious undertone. Spiritual, maybe I should say that more than religious especially from an Africanized point of view. So it wasn't always as much religious as it was a spiritual thing. But that education in this view would be functional. So teaching your child functional things, that benefit the community, that lead to kind of it's holistic in terms of the environment, what you're doing for your family. So how do you fit into those like niche societies? And obviously, again, there are arguments for and arguments against it. I missed this perennialism, which speaks about there being kind of universal truth and principles that are constant. So the idea that so some things, so there's this idea that doesn't matter what the West comes with, these things will always remain true. Like these certain concepts or lessons in life will always remain true no matter what happens over time. So And if you take all of that together, not individually, you can kind of really interrogate them and find fault. But if you look at those concepts as a collective, like, oh wow, that kind of does sound like it sounds like an education system. It does not some loosey-goosey, everyone raises a child kind of mentality. It's a lot more than just that. It almost sounds than a lot more like what Caps is saying than what one thinks initially. Although it is quite different. So yeah, it speaks about everybody in the community kind of playing their part, that every adult is a teacher. And I like this part. Old age, isn't this lovely? Such a nice quote. Old age is a library. Isn't that very cool? And it's cool if you think about it, um, like old people aren't thrown away in the society. The elderly are respected for the knowledge and the knowledge that they have and they can transfer onto others. Whereas in our current society that we all speak about so highly, um, you know, the elderly get locked away into homes, far away. They're no longer useful to us. We don't engage with them anymore because actually they've got all this knowledge. Um, and obviously then I mean, I've got other shortcomings in my mind, but according to the textbook, so obviously there's a sense of indoctrination that you've got to then believe in this, whether it's a tribal thing, whether it's a, you know, like a broader ethnic grouping that you're a part of, and that you're being indoctrinated into only that belief system. So obviously it's quite prevalent in South Africa. And that other concern, the absence of literary work, that it has to be passed on by people from people to people. And because it was not written down, how do you transfer that knowledge? Which is quite a silly concern. Anyway, I'm just really watching the time. Sorry, I want to get through these at least. Then Mo, the most recent, a more liberal idea, that individuals should have power to reason and to choose. Individuals can determine education they desire. So, this is the dream, and where people seem to be going nowadays with online learning, with design your own curriculum. Schools, we're going that way where you get to choose combinations of subjects. And that we shouldn't be rewarding conformity at all. We should be rewarding not conforming. Mill felt that democracy favored the majority and that this had its own dangers by only following what the majority wants, because the majority currently can be swayed by different things. The majority can be just based on politics. And I don't know what your views on politics. I won't share mine. So it's saying, yeah, that education can have exams about science and facts, but it must be in the hands of unbiased education experts. And by that saying that there is a lot of bias like, look at the history textbooks is a good example. Like history textbooks in South Africa and worldwide, but ours most recently, is it the last decade, has gone through like some major, okay, maybe a bit more than the last decade. But I mean, when I was at school, all I learned about was the Groot Trek, the settlers, and very like it was like held up to a level of respectability. How these people traveled across the seas to find the continent and establish trade with the Dutch East India Company and develop buildings and develop society. I don't know. Looking back now, was that a good idea? I don't know. Remember, these are just my views. Don't you must have your own, is what I'm trying to say. Um, okay, so you understand what I mean about the education experts. It's on the time for you to like at least ask a question. Okay, so at the end of the day, the question is like, who should decide who controls and who structures society? I mean, education. Go look in your textbook. I think this is really fun. Gutman combines these three, so education is based on non-repression, so freedom from interference, and non-discrimination. But it needs participation from everybody, state, family, and individual freedom. So is that the way out? Is that the way forward? Okay, so this is what I was trying to get at, my end goal. So I want you to start, and I hope I've made some like decent examples of understanding what the implications of these theories are for your education system. So what does that mean for the CAP system that we're working now? What does that mean for your understanding of education? Okay, I'm gonna park it there. I said I wouldn't get to all of them now. So the big question is, who should control education? Remember, you also do in your classroom, in your own small way. You also control it. I think I was still telling you a story and I got distracted. I was saying in my class, when they used to walk into class, eventually I figured out the trick. I would I was at a forged privilege school. We had projectors, and I would play off my own laptop like little comedy clips and stuff. So kids would want to walk into the class because they know, okay, Morgan, when we walk in, he's always gonna play something funny. And I'd find like short clips, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, not long. And then when they walked in, they'd really want to watch the clip and listen to the joke. And so they'd walk in and they'd go like, shh, 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 I'm listening. Or tell the others, shh, I'm listening. And they'd like listen for those 3 minutes, and then they'd have a hell of a big laugh. And they got used to that. It was just one joke, 3 minutes, and then we get to work. But then, it's compared to me standing outside the classroom making them line up, or compared to them coming in chaotically and me shouting for 10 minutes to try to get them to settle down, detention, detention, and then I must sit in detention with them, or I must give them punishment and I must go and check the punishment. I mean, who wants to live a life like that? So how about 3 minutes of comedy? Oh, that's my grand ending. Ta-da. Okay, with 1 minute left. You okay? Was that cool? Was that clear? Any questions?
Oh, good. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. Yeah, that makes some sense at least. A little bit. I hope so. I told you I like this section way too much. Okay. Okay, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for your time. I will post this. Um, I know it's been quiet, but I think things will pick up again. We had a bit of a break. So please keep your eye on the pacer for anything that's happening. I told everyone else earlier on, I should have your marks done, I hope by tomorrow. I'm going to pull it all night tonight. I think I should have them all done by tomorrow. When the marks are released, we only have class again on the 6th of August. So please, you're welcome to give me a shout if you have a query. I'm happy for you to have a query, but let's not fight about stuff. Like, it's a conversation. If you think there's something wrong, I'll check, I'll tell you why, etc. Okay? Okay. You have a good evening. Thank you for coming, and we'll talk soon. Cool. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Good evening. Bye.
Bye. So welcome. Bye.